this across to Glenn Carle, Dr. Merowitz. Yes, Glenn Carle, do you want to come in on this? There are indeed questions being raised on the FBI. You had the New Orleans police say, this was an act of terror. Then you had the FBI contradicting that very statement in its initial probe, saying that it's not a terrorism act. Then they came out with a final statement where they said that they're probing this as an act of terrorism. Clearly, raising a lot of questions on the investigative agencies there.
Yes, well, our colleague makes some points I agree with, not all, but some. I think the coincidence of the truck rental venue is certainly of note and needs to be pursued. That's true, and I don't think it should surprise anyone, although it should be noted by the authorities definitely that these events have involved, as our colleague pointed out, a Tesla product, a Trump hotel, the date shortly prior to the inauguration. All those things are significant, or potentially significant. At least they are noteworthy. It's too early, however, to say that we know that there's a coherent web and a mastermind behind this. There may be. More typically, what these attacks are these inspired, and I use the word guardedly, individuals who think that they're striking a blow against injustice and racism and all of their frankly cockamamie series of logical reasonings. That it isn't Islamically inspired, radically so. That seems quite clear, I think, at least with the New Orleans attack. Beyond that, I think it's a bit harsh to instantaneously condemn the authorities. Certainly, they should be considering the advantages and dangers of holding a mass event right away. However, the last thing I'll note for the moment is all of us, whether we're officials or observers, as we are all talking right now, have an instinctive reflex after a catastrophe. Once the crocodile grabs the water buffalo in the water hole, all of us run away from the edge of the water because we think it's we might be eaten too. When in fact the danger is not necessarily, and statistically tends not to be, greater after the event than before. But an authority's job is to look at the risks and to weigh this. And at present, we certainly do not know, and it's too early to reach a conclusion on that point.
I absolutely understand, Glenn Carle, what you're saying, but I think a lot of Americans also feel that the authorities had the job of also alerting them that the crocodile is there in the water and that you need to be careful before going closer. Basically, keeping a tab on the kind of risk that might be involved with this particular person and tracking him or her. But let me get in the two political representatives on this discussion on the show. And before I get to the mass shooting and the never-ending gun control law debate in the US, Vibhuti Jha, how concerned are you as an American, as a Republican, that all these attacks come ahead of the Trump inauguration, particularly the Tesla Cybertruck exploding, clearly trying to send out a message?
Thank you, Shreya, for having me, and delighted to be with such illustrious group of people here. As an American, I know one thing for sure. You can't take a decision based on what you don't know. And my favorite phrase is, we have to act knowing what we know. That's important. So Glenn is right, Mark is right, is the fact that we can't come to conclusion yet. But what is the bleeding obvious is the ideological trend in the processes that are happening here. This is not the first attack. And the rate at which things are going, this won't be the last either. And many army headquarters and many army places have been attacked by people who have been in the armed forces, and it was termed as workplace violence. So what is the important part here is for us to actually discuss with saner minds that are we sacrificing public safety for political correctness? That's the issue that we need to talk about. Today, the way I know some of the things is that we are almost prohibited from calling out the truth the way it is. Why are we blind to the fact that it is the ideological bent of mind, is the ideological thread that lets them do what they do, and they are systematically abusing and taking advantage of freedom as the fault line of democracy. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. Freedom has become the fault line of democracy, and the criminals and thugs are taking full advantage of that because they know they are not guilty until proven so. And we all know, all the four people here know, that how difficult it is to prove things because you have to connect so many dots. The other part, which is very important to understand, the ideological bent, is the 3 V's that I have often talked about: vote bank, violence on the street, and victimhood. That's the modus operandi. So what are we going to do to prevent these disruption of the American way of life, of celebration, of events, social and cultural events? Now people would be afraid to go. There will be many people who will drop out of Trump inaugural event, and I was going to go, and I will probably go. But the point of the matter here is that everybody will be looking over their shoulder, not knowing what's coming from which quarter. And to that end, the law and order and the civil society
let
of
me take
America
this
has
across.
to become more aligned.